The 19-year-old mastermind. He didn't wear designer suits. He didn't flaunt sports cars. He didn't even live in the UK. But by the time he turned 23, Eddie Burton, a baby-faced kid from Liverpool, was running one of Britain's most efficient drug trafficking operations, stretching from Amsterdam to Spain, through Dover, and into the hands of UK street dealers. Estimated value, £20 million. What made Burton different wasn't violence or intimidation, it was precision. No weapons, no turf wars, just clean logistics, burner phones, and loyal couriers. The shipments were huge, the risks were low, and for years the system worked, until it didn't. In 2022, 2 modified lorries were stopped at Dover. Inside, hundreds of kilos of heroin, cocaine, and ketamine, hidden behind fake fuel tanks, linked to encrypted messaging and carrying one unexpected trace, Burton's DNA. But by then, he was long gone, living between Spain and the Netherlands, using fake identities, recruiting couriers, and managing the drug routes like a cross-border supply chain. Smooth, silent, scalable. When British authorities issued a Europe-wide alert, Burton vanished. Until, in 2023, he resurfaced, not in a trap house or back alley, but at Pacha nightclub in Ibiza, wearing a cap low over his face, dancing under neon lights. He was arrested on the spot. What followed was a court case that revealed not just one man's empire, but a new kind of drug boss, young, digital, and invisible. From Liverpool to Europe, Eddie Burton grew up in Liverpool, surrounded by poverty, petty crime, and the silent pull of street economy. But unlike most, Burton wasn't loud. He didn't flash knives or post on Snapchat. He watched, listened, and disappeared. At just 19 years old, he vanished from his home turf, leaving behind no major criminal record, no surveillance trail, and no one who seemed to know where he'd gone. But while friends assumed he'd gone quiet, Burton was already in motion. Sources later confirmed that by early 2020, he had relocated to mainland Europe, moving between Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and eventually southern Spain. In each city, he made quiet connections, not to dealers in the streets, but to wholesale traffickers, courier recruiters, and logistics fixers. He didn't need muscle. He had encrypted phones, a clean passport, and a sharp sense for operational security. While British police focused on county lines crews and local gangland rivalries, Burton was studying the wholesale game, learning how to bring drugs in at scale, package them, and move them quietly into Britain's heartland. His network began to take shape, lorry drivers mostly unaware of the true cargo, industrial concealment methods like double-walled fuel tanks, ketamine, heroin, cocaine, sourced from Dutch and Spanish suppliers, delivery routes running through Dover, where customs screening could be gamed with timing and clean documentation. From 2020 to 2022, Burton lived as a ghost. No Instagram, no bills, no digital footprint beyond the encrypted lines he used to coordinate every move. He wasn't just hiding. He was building a machine. And when the first shipment finally got stopped, investigators had no face, no voice, no trace, only a few grams of DNA, and a name they hadn't heard in years, Eddie Burton. Drivers, couriers, and European suppliers. At the height of his operation, Eddie Burton wasn't just moving drugs. He was moving volume, quietly, consistently, internationally. Unlike flashy gangs that posted stacks of cash online, Burton's setup was invisible. He designed a distribution chain, not a crew. Each link was clean, each role compartmentalized. No one except Burton saw the full picture. At the base were couriers, mostly British nationals, often unaware of the full weight of what they were carrying. Some were recruited directly, others through intermediaries. They drove across Europe in hired lorries, sometimes picking up loads from industrial parks outside Rotterdam or Barcelona and heading straight for Dover. But these weren't amateur concealments. Burton's product, heroin, cocaine, ketamine, was hidden inside. Modified fuel tanks, false industrial drums, pallets of legitimate cargo with double floors. He'd studied other failures. He avoided patterns. No single driver was used too often. No route was repeated too frequently. Payments were made in cryptocurrency or handed off via coded cash exchanges. Phones were wiped after each run. The drugs were sourced from Dutch labs and Spanish contacts, likely tied to larger European trafficking groups. But Burton kept it tight. No big meetings, no flashy meetings, no club drop-ins. Everything went through encrypted devices, possibly EncroChat, Sky ECC, or lesser-known apps designed for zero traceability. And yet Burton never lived large. No Rolex, no Lamborghini, no Dubai. That was the genius and the flaw. His network was so smooth, so minimal, that when it collapsed, it was nearly impossible to see where it started. Until one slip, 2 lorries, stopped at Dover. And inside, not just drugs, but a name. Eddie Burton wasn't just moving narcotics. He'd built a cross-border supply chain worth £20 million before his 25th birthday, cracking the operation. It all started with a routine stop. In summer 2022, Border Force officers at the port of Dover flagged down a lorry arriving from mainland Europe. The driver, calm, cooperative, and holding legitimate paperwork, claimed to be carrying industrial supplies. But the weight was off. The cargo didn't match the manifest, and a dog unit reacted strongly near the fuel tank. When investigators opened it, they didn't find diesel. They found bricks of ketamine, cocaine, and heroin, packed in air-sealed plastic, coated in grease, and buried in a double-walled compartment. In total, over 150 kilograms of Class A and B drugs. Street value, millions. A second vehicle, flagged days later, followed the same pattern, same route, same concealment method, same materials. Inside the second lorry, another 150-plus kg of drugs, along with a trail of forensic evidence. Partial fingerprints, chemical traces, and one crucial item, a disposable glove with skin cells inside. When the samples came back, they delivered a surprise. Eddie Burton, a name unknown to most, flagged in an old Liverpool juvenile record, but not on any active watch list. The Dover seizures weren't random. They were the crack in the armor. British investigators launched Operation Phelan, combining intelligence from Border Force, NCA, and European agencies. They backtracked the lorry routes, seized phones, and traced vehicle rentals in the Netherlands and Spain. Burton's name reappeared, linked to an apartment in Rotterdam, a rented warehouse outside Malaga, and a trail of digital breadcrumbs tied to anonymous payment wallets. But he wasn't in the UK. He hadn't been in years, and now they knew. This wasn't just a courier's mistake. This was an international trafficking network built and managed by a kid who disappeared at 19 and re-emerged as a criminal logistics expert. The chase was on, and Eddie Burton was now Europe's most wanted 23-year-old, from neon lights to handcuffs. For over a year, Eddie Burton remained untouchable. He slipped through Europe unnoticed, moving between Airbnb rentals, cheap hotels, and encrypted phone numbers. He rarely stayed in one country more than a month. He used fake IDs, and his network operated on autopilot. Then, in August 2023, everything fell apart. Spanish police, acting on an Interpol red notice issued by UK authorities, received a tip. A man matching Burton's description had been spotted on CCTV at Pacha Ibiza, one of the island's most iconic nightclubs. He entered alone, wore a baseball cap low over his eyes, moved like someone who didn't want to be noticed. But he was. Under the flashing lights and pounding bass, plainclothes Spanish officers watched from across the club. They waited, confirmed the ID, and moved in. Burton was arrested on the dance floor, surrounded by champagne bottles and strobe lights. He didn't resist. He barely said a word. At the time of his arrest, he was using a false name, carrying €3,000 in cash and holding 2 encrypted mobile phones. Authorities believe he had been in Ibiza only a few days, possibly scoping a new route or planning another disappearance. Within hours, he was in a holding cell. Within weeks, he was extradited and, via Germany, under armed escort, back to the UK. The ghost was finally cornered. When reporters caught him on camera during transfer, Burton didn't look like a kingpin. He looked like a lost teenager, clean-shaven, soft-spoken, and far younger than the 20 million pounds weight tied to his name. But the evidence was already stacked. The DNA, the messages, the Dover shipments. And now, the courtroom would see the full scope of what he'd built. The Courtroom Collapse. In early 2024, Eddie Burton stood before Canterbury Crown Court, charged with importing hundreds of kilos of heroin, cocaine, and ketamine into the UK. Crimes carrying potential life sentences, but the courtroom wasn't filled with violence, gang feuds, or bloody turf wars. Instead, it was cold logistics, encrypted tech, and forensic precision. The prosecution laid out a case that shocked even seasoned observers. Over the span of 2 years, Burton had orchestrated multiple cross-border shipments using clean couriers, sourced drugs from Dutch and Spanish wholesalers, concealed narcotics in industrial transport vehicles, including custom-modified fuel tanks, coordinated every move using military-grade encrypted phones, laundered proceeds through shell accounts, crypto wallets, and offshore cash drops. The evidence was overwhelming. His DNA and fingerprints were found on packaging from both Dover seizures. Travel records showed his presence near key logistics sites in Rotterdam, Marbella, and Liège, and retrieved messages, even partially decrypted, connected him directly to drop instructions, shipment codes, and handoffs. Burton's defense? Minimal. No gang ties, no violence, no previous major convictions. But the judge made it clear. This was not a boy caught in the wrong crowd. This was a man who built his own criminal empire from the shadows. In February 2025, Burton was sentenced to 24 years in prison for importing Class A and B drugs into the UK, with a minimum of 16 before parole. His co-defendant and ex-partner, Cian Banks, also pleaded guilty to money laundering and assisting in the movement of funds. She received 9 years. The courtroom fell silent. This wasn't a typical drug boss. There were no guns, no bloodshed, just structure, strategy, and discipline. Burton had weaponized logistics and invisibility, and now he'd pay for it, with decades behind bars. A new kind of kingpin, brains over bullets. Eddie Burton wasn't the first British trafficker to run drugs across Europe, but he was part of a new generation, one that didn't need violence to gain power. He never carried a gun. He didn't run a crew with street soldiers or lookouts. He didn't flex on social media or show off piles of cash. What made Burton dangerous was his discipline. He treated drug trafficking like a logistics enterprise, rooted in anonymity, technology, and quiet loyalty. In contrast to gangland kingpins who ruled with fear, Burton ruled with efficiency. He used clean couriers, no criminal records, no tattoos, no red flags. He moved product via industrial freight routes, not street corners. He never touched the drugs, he just connected the dots. And he operated from countries with weak extradition pathways, making him harder to pin down. His empire may not have lasted long, but it did something few drug networks ever manage. It ran without violence, without headlines, and nearly without a trace. Burton represented the future of organized crime in the UK. Young, invisible, highly mobile, and digitally fluent. And he wasn't alone. Law enforcement officials have confirmed that Burton's case is just one of several active investigations into ghost traffickers. Individuals who coordinate major operations with encrypted phones, legitimate front jobs, and cross-border tactics that resemble business strategy more than backstreet dealing. In a world where you don't need to be seen to have power, Eddie Burton had it all, until the day it caught up with him, the empire that almost vanished. When the story of Eddie Burton finally hit the news, most people were stunned. A baby-faced 23-year-old from Liverpool, arrested on a dance floor in Ibiza, charged with importing 20 million pounds worth of drugs without ever pulling a trigger or raising his voice. But that's what made his empire so dangerous. There were no gang wars, no shootouts, no turf battles, just cold, methodical logistics, and a young man who understood that in modern organized crime, visibility is liability. For 2 years, Burton ran his operation like a shadow CEO. No social media, no flashy lifestyle, just encrypted orders, clean couriers, and industrial concealment. And for a while it worked. But in the end, it wasn't a rival gang or undercover sting that brought him down. It was a glove left behind, a fingerprint, a lorry that weighed just a little too much. In an age of data, even ghosts leave traces. Burton's arrest and conviction sent a message, not just to the street-level players, but to the silent ones in the background, the ones with no tattoos, no rap sheets, and no heat, who think they can operate from behind screens and passports. The law is watching them too, because the future of drug trafficking doesn't look like it used to. It looks like Eddie Burton.